want to start off with the definition of disability. Now I have two definitions up here, and the reason being is that there is always the legal definition, and that is a very important definition for all of us to know, and it's needed for a variety of reasons. First off, the legal definition, which is through the Americans with Disability Act, is needed for all people with disabilities when they're looking for any kind of services. They need to decide if they fit in there when they're looking for benefits, when they're looking for housing, when they're looking for any kind of things. It also affects your work directly because if there is a crime and a person has a disability, then those charges might be higher in that particular charge against the defendant. And the way of knowing that person has a disability is they need to be defined through the legal definition for those charges to be heightened. I know there's a variety of them that can affect with domestics and outside of domestics. Now, when I had done my research in graduate school around disability, I did bring in the legal definition because I understand the importance of it. But one of the pieces for me that I think is even more important is having a sociological definition, because a legal definition only starts the very foundation to describe what it is to have a disability. It doesn't take into account the day-to-day things. It doesn't take into account the personal experiences. And when doing my definition, I came across this one, is that a disability is a complex psychological, social, and political reality in which one lives day by day. And myself as a woman with a disability, I feel that that really defines what disability is for me, because it is true. It's something I live with every single second of the day. There are days that I want to close my eyes and forget that I have a disability because it's hard, and there are days that I forget I have a disability because I'm just used to doing stuff my own way. And then there's also all the pieces of it that make me the person I am because I do have a disability. And so I think this definition is helpful because it incorporates how complex disability really is for individuals. Now, the other thing that is really important about understanding how people are treated is to understand why we treat people the way that we do. And what I've come to understand is that we need to look at our history. We need to look at why is it that we have these assumptions about people and try to figure out what we can do about changing those assumptions against people. And so in particular, people with disabilities, I've looked into the historical background of the treatment of people with disabilities. And this old colloquium was something I had learned that really threw me for a loop when I first read it, knowing that this term that I've heard many times in my life, that we're going to beat the devil out of him, had more to do around the treatment of people with disabilities than just anything else. And it made me stop and think and say, wow, I really need to know when I say something what that really means and the impact that that could have on a complete huge culture around me. And so that is one piece of history, is that when you say or when you do something, you may not know the context of where that colloquium comes from, and therefore you may not know the impact. And so that's why history is important. Now, historically, people with disabilities were completely regarded as a social problem, a menace to society. And the thought was, okay, we need to get rid of them because they're a menace, they're useless, they're something that we just don't want to deal with. And so they did that in a variety of different ways. They were placed in institutions because it was a medical problem often, historically. We want to cure you, you have a disability. Especially if there was something of a mental disability, you were crazy, so why not put you in an institution or put you in some kind of asylum and close the door? Then there were special schools that people were sent to. And when I first read this, I thought, wow, that's crazy. And I had mentioned it to my mom, and she said, yeah, those special schools existed when you were in grade school, Sheila. I said, what? Because she had the experience as being a parent with a child with a disability and had a teacher tell her, oh, you don't want to enroll your daughter here. There's schools down the street for children like her. So I was born in 1978. So the need for education is something that has been happening, but it hasn't been happening nearly as long as it needs to. Now, there are also ways of getting rid of people. When the asylums and the institutions were filled up, we then tried to put them in the hospital because maybe that mental disability could have been fixed and cured. And then when that was no longer a viable place to put them, we decided workhouses and prisons. Because if you have a disability, we should throw you in jail and lock the key. And this is ideas of people with disabilities that is true to this day. We have the eugenics movement that happened in this country, and I think it was in some states, even into the late 70s, it was legal to have a person with a disability sterilized so that they couldn't procreate, because they would cause more social menace and the whole human race would have more issues. People with disabilities are the largest growing minority in America. And many times people just don't understand that. And there's probably a lot more at this point because that stat's a little old. But in '98, there were 54 million Americans with disabilities. And now it's 2010, so who knows how large that number is at this point. And the violent crime rate for a person with a disability is 4 to 10 times higher than a person without a disability. And, we think about how our impressions are, or what we think of people with disabilities because of our historical treatment of them. That is possibly one of the factors that makes that crime rate so high. And that's why education is so important. So we look at the crimes that occur specifically around people with developmental disabilities. They're a population within disability that is even more vulnerable. And it shows here that the crime rate for them is 5 million. And then you look compared to some of the other crimes of other populations in the states, and it is 4 or 5 times higher than some of the other ones. You have child abuse at 1.5 million, spousal and elder abuse at 1 million, and hate crimes at 800,000. And so it's not even just a little bit, it's hugely significant on the rate of violent crime that's happening to people with developmental disabilities. And the thing is when you have a developmental disability, you have, in some cases, very difficulty to express yourself and tell people that some kind of violent crime is happening to you. The other factor around disability and violent crime is talking about the fact that the experience for people with disabilities who have crimes against them, they're happening for a longer period of time than the general population. And it's true that there are many people without disabilities that it does happen for years and years, but for people with disabilities as a general group, it happens over and over and over again. And it happens by a greater number of perpetrators. And one of the pieces that makes that fact true is the amount of people that are institutions or independent living centers or things of that where they need home health cares or PCAs, things of those nature. Even if they live in their own home and a worker is coming in to help them, those people are changing all the time. There is not the kind of education for those workers that needs to be. It's a job posting that says, okay, go help this person. They need to make sure that they're fed, their medication's given to them, and they get to the grocery store. They're not getting support around what it is to be there day in and day out for a person who really needs help. And it can be a draining work. Unfortunately, there are some people with disabilities that don't have the independence that some do. And so when you're putting a person in a situation without any kind of training, you're setting up for a horrible experience to happen. And the thing is it continues to happen over and over and over again. The other thing is that with disability is that there has a larger chance of those people needing someone or needing something. So for example, myself, I don't have any arms, and so I've grown up with a dressing stick. When you did the video that just went, you saw me on the floor and there was a little stick in my hand. That was the first dressing stick that my mom made me. Because they were like, oh, someone needs to help her dress for the rest of her life. And my mother said, I don't think so. And so she took a broomstick, and she took a hanger, she cut the hanger, she put a little hole in the broomstick, and they somehow glued it inside and said, here's your arm. And they helped me learn to use it, which was great. The thing is, though, that device, if it's taken away from me, I can't dress myself, I may not be able to reach things, and yeah, if it's gone for a short period of time, may not be that big of a deal, but the emotional impact can be really difficult. And I had my bag stolen this year, and I call it my hook, it's been called, it was in there. And so I went 4 hours without my dressing stick, and I tell you, I've gone 4 hours before without going to the restroom and never cared. But that made a huge impact because I knew that someone had stolen it, and now I couldn't do this without asking for aid, and that's not something that I want to ask for aid for. And so that's one of my personal experiences of a needed medical device. And there are other clients that have wheelchairs. They may even have medication, or in some cases they have dressing that needs to be changed. And so when you have to rely on others or other things, and those things are taken away, it has such a deep internal impact on you that that crime is even worse than just being hit in the face, because it goes to a level that is just extremely hurtful.